Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Good afternoon. It's the 17th of May, and it's been an interesting last couple of weeks. We're getting reports of vitamin deficiencies, like vitamin D is a cause of, what was it? I get the two confused. There's vitamin D and selenium, and they both have some kind of effect on the cardiovascular and cardiopulmonary system. And then it's also coming out that part of the reason that children are less affected is because their bodies naturally produce more melatonin than adults do. As we age, our efficiency at producing and processing melatonin decreases over time. And so some children have a natural boost of melatonin. And so there's a correlation to children who are experiencing more severe respiratory issues with lowered melatonin levels. And so this goes on up the scale to adults, where adults have reduced melatonin, and adults as they get older seem to be experiencing more severe versions of this virus or the disease itself. And so the interesting thing about vitamin D was you'd think that in like a sunny, more equatorial or tropical location there would be more vitamin D in the system, but it's turning out that places like Spain and Italy got hit really hard, and places like Sweden weren't hit as hard. And there's a light correlation to the quality of dietary fortification of vitamins.
I don't know how much I buy any of this personally, in that the science is like coming from a paradigm that basically
it's looking for a problem, so it's going to find something.
Well, and when you're talking about all these correlations, I'm sure we could find a bunch of other random correlations too, but if you're looking for a certain, like what I've found, just having completed an advanced statistics course for my doctorate, what has happened with a lot of statistics framing is that population samples are analyzed for correlations, and then those correlations are extrapolated to meanings that aren't actually necessarily present. So in that, when we're talking about all these correlations, yeah, I'm sure the correlations are there, but if they didn't say anything about the lambda or the statistical significance of the population results, like it's hard to say that if those results are even statistically significant, in that you can present statistics and without the proper understanding, they're always going to look significant if you present them a certain way. But just because statistics come a certain result doesn't even actually mean they're statistically significant. So in that, when you have populations like having these correlations, it may have nothing to do with what they're trying to extrapolate. Because then the vitamin D thing, this is where people were like trying to say, oh, this may be why black people are dying more because of the vitamin D deficiency. And that's a whole lot of bullshit. That is a whole lot of bullshit.
My understanding is that black people are naturally so efficient at processing vitamin D that it's like the rest of the world could only hope to process vitamin D like that, basically.
And not just that, it's the systemic problems with the access to healthcare. And for example, if you're black and you have a pain that you are trying to get figured out at the doctor, they probably won't give you a painkiller because they assume you're just coming there trying to fake an injury to get a painkiller, so you don't necessarily get the proper care. And this happens frequently, and that's why you have a lot of black women who have heart attacks that don't get treated as such, because black people don't get their pain taken seriously
Yeah.
in the first place.
Well, that's I think that's a cultural issue within the culture of medicine that needs to be addressed. It's I'm sure that there are people who will find the numbers to support that kind of patient care.
There's been studies. The studies are out there. You can, I mean, I can look them up while you're talking.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I'm sure that there's always going to be some version of information that's like that supports somebody's argument for why. I mean, the 80s were rife with stories of the welfare queen, and we know now that's just a complete fabrication. So it's always one of those things that we have to temper. I saw a really interesting picture earlier today, and it was talking about how it's important to be skeptical, and intelligence is really like, you know, a reflection of our ability to think critically and to question the things that we see, not just to be intelligent and smart about things or quick-witted or have some repository of one-liners to stab back at people with, which is kind of what the discourse on the internet has been devolving to for as long as I've been paying attention to the internet. You know, and I think that's kind of central to all of this stuff, is that there's no real dialogue anymore. It's turning into this presentation of data, and there are a lot of reactions to it, and then people will get their information funneled through their trusted sources. Like, you know, like Alex Jones is being sued for lying about what was it, the Sandy Hook kids dying. He said that was a lie, that didn't happen. And, you know, that's just like unacceptable. So
Well, he had his fans going after the family members.
yeah, that too. I mean, it's this broad. There's this really strange disconnect with when things happen, how long it takes for any source to break it down, and then the amount of time for that you know, tangle of lies, that messed up wad of untruth to get circulated within a group of people, and the next thing you know, they're showing up at someone's house, and it's not even the right house.
Yeah, man. And there's just so much shit that happens with police brutality and unnecessary killing that the Second Amendment nuts aren't protesting when they're talking about personal freedoms and fighting against government. It's like, what are you guys actually protesting against? And what I see is they're protesting to preserve white supremacist infrastructure that they know exists, but they also want to pretend doesn't exist, to then claim anybody who points at it is racist. Yeah. So I know all their playbooks, and it's like, one of the things that we also have to be wary of is one of the Republican playbooks is starting a war in the first if it's in the first term of a president's like run, if he has one, you know, usually the Republican presidents are the ones that try to start the war near the end of the first term to galvanize their base to continue into the second term. So that's kind of where I don't think we're at a place where we can start a war. But the issue is, like, the left wing has been too easily manipulated into supporting shit in the recent years, where it's like, if anybody needs to be warned not to support a war right now, it's the left wing, because they'll be like, oh, what about the people in Syria while black people are murdered, and they're just ignoring the fucking cops here murdering black people?
What was it, like back in March? We just found out about this too, like this last week. A woman, an EMT, and her boyfriend were asleep in their house when an unannounced raid or something like that, some kind of like no-knock raid
at the wrong house,
at the wrong fucking house. And then her boyfriend fired back because he thought they were fucking being robbed, and lo and behold, some SWAT dude gets shot in the leg. So he's going to be charged with attempted murder for defending his home. And then they killed his girlfriend. They shot her like 10 times.
Why aren't white people who are Second Amendment nuts protesting that
not
shit.
not even the 2A nuts, but the Constitution, the champions and protectors of the Constitution, the ones that always like chime in with some really obscure, overruled by precedent 100 years or so later. But because our legal system allows for precedent to change the way that the rules are interpreted because of circumstance. But they're not even, they're forgetting the whole unalienable rights part, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Like life and liberty are paramount to this, and it's like that doesn't get defended enough. It's always encapsulated in this illusionary freedom. Like it's, oh yeah, we're free to go out and do all this stuff. Ugh.
They always leave out the part it's only for white men.
Yeah,
it's only for white men, because when you see a black man doing the thing that they always claim that they're fighting for, they're fucking silent as fuck. And it's been so long, like the fact that dude is being charged with attempted murder, that he was defending his home. Indiana has a law specifically protecting you in that situation, which it doesn't. If you were black, they wouldn't actually apply it to you anyway. But if you're a white man, they would protect you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where, again, it's like there's all these things about, when people are trying to say, oh, we're going back to open the economy and get back to normal, they're trying to preserve that shit. Because where's the last time you've heard about a terrorist attack? Or any terrorist shit? Because they can't. White supremacists don't have enough of attention span to focus on multiple things at once. So it's either black people, Asians, or Muslims. And it's like, or Indians or Sikhs that they think are Muslims. And it's like, they only have so much attention span to focus on having racist outlet. It
always blew my mind when I saw a picture of a Sikh in the media, and they're sitting there, and their turbans in their hand. It's all unrolled because they got assaulted by some racist idiot who didn't understand. And then of course it comes out they were yelling obscenities at Muslims. Like what? It's just such a surreal disconnect.
I mean, but that's what happens when you have a culture that believes its own culture is more important than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And then you can then there's this whole thing. It shouldn't matter if they thought he was a Muslim, because there's multiple types of Muslims. You can't paint
tell
all Muslims with the same brush.
Exactly.
And be like, oh, this person's a Wahhabi. He's an extremist. Like, yeah. I mean, no, Americans don't even know what the fuck a Wahhabi is, let alone difference between, Sunni and a Shia, to know why, somebody in Iran isn't necessarily going to be allied with somebody in Iraq.
So this morning I read that a person went to church and infected 150 plus of the churchgoers with coronavirus. And so all these people are now on quarantine, and they've got to do the contact tracing with anyone that they've come in contact with since last Sunday, and which is thousands of people now, or the potential for thousands of people now. And it occurred to me, it's like, you can't just look at somebody and know that they're asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, because I can't tell the difference between somebody who has a cough from seasonal allergies or the common cold or the flu, or because they have some pneumonia that nobody knows about, or because they've got the COVID. I can't just look at somebody and tell. I'm sure there are people out there who believe they can, but I'm sure those people also believe in a lot of things. So.
And this gets back to the whole, starting to test for temperatures and shit. At the TSA, again, it's like, you have a bunch of people who didn't do well in science now trying to figure out solutions to figure out how to find who has COVID at the airport and shit. Like, oh, we'll just monitor their temperatures. If they're running the temperature, they might have it. Well, guess what? They already fucking infected people by the time they got there now.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's all this stupid shit.
Just talking alone emits the tiny particles into the air. So having a conversation with somebody, probably even at the advertised 6 foot, that's probably still too close.
Yeah.
when I go to the store, I try to make a beeline and just like go get everything that's on my list, and I don't look for anything else. I just ignore everything else, and I try to avoid people. And when I see an aisle that's got some people in it between me and where I need to be, I'll go to the next aisle and see if it's clear. And half the time when I've gone, because I go like in the earlier afternoon, it's been all right. But there have been a few times where I've had to I go out of my way, and I feel like, why are people socializing in a place with semi-confined spaces?
I mean, even before this shit happened, I had stopped going out as much as possible because they had bed bugs in the fucking theaters.
Yeah.
People are gross. Like, people are unpredictable and do stupid, dangerous shit. I didn't like being in public in the first place before all this shit happened. So now I'm even less inclined. You have to pay me to get out of the fucking house. So it's like...
No, it's true.
When I was doing home installations of security systems before all this shit happened, and now I keep getting these requests to do it for the same price as before COVID. And I'm like, are you guys fucking stupid? You think I'm going to go in somebody's house for like the same shit you were paying before this all happened? As if there's not a fucking pandemic.
Yeah.
It's like the people who are capitalists act like there has been no increase in demand for the shit that they were paying minimum wage or whatever before. Like, when people were trying to underpay before, that was because they knew they had the upper hand in negotiating. They're still trying to act like they have the upper hand in negotiating in terms of manual labor. Like, no, I'm not coming out of the fucking house for less than $300. Not less than $300 now. Fuck that.
Yeah.
A lot of
the I remember when you told me about that program. It was kind of like Lyft or Uber, but for home tech service type stuff. And I looked at it and I considered it for a while, but I thought, it's like, man, these are all things that normal people can do. These aren't like special. Well, some of them require special understanding.
You're not thinking about people's grandparents. That's who most of the fuck. I was helping people's grandparents.
Where
I'm
are their
not
kids?
helping you.
I know, but that's the thing. Like, where are their kids? Why aren't those people?
Because capitalism has separated them from their kids, so they're not like, their kids don't fucking care about going and helping their parents now because their parents can pay for it, and their parents are more apt to pay a random stranger than to pay their kid to do it. So that's why their kid won't do it for free, because of capitalism. That's I can tell you exactly why.
No, that was
Go
great.
see all the fucking. They would talk about their kids like there would be so many times their kids would be working at like NASA or some shit, and they could easily come help them out. But clearly, their parents are fucking assholes because of capitalism. So they didn't want to come help them out for free. That's what happened. That's exactly who.
That's the real dilly of the pickle. There are people out there who are willing to pay a stranger more than they would pay their own kids to do something that their kids could do. Holy shit. That's so fucked up. We've got a generation of parents who would rather pay a stranger. I can understand if their kids are like, extra studious or academic and book driven and don't have the body of a construction worker or a field laborer, and so there are things that they are physically limited or shouldn't be doing because they'll hurt themselves. I can get that. But electronics installs, configuring a network, setting up the TV, installing a complex speaker system. I think if someone's parents is installing that kind of stuff in their home, their kids know everything about it already. And that's like...
Of course. And this is why I know, after doing it in so many homes and seeing how those, like, most of the people were very nice. It's just the way they treat monetary exchanges. I could see why their kid didn't want to do it, because their parents would rather pay somebody they don't know than pay them.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, of course their kid doesn't want to fucking do it because their parents has money to throw at some stranger to show them how to use a fucking cell phone. And that's where,
I was so pleased when my dad was like, hey, what phone should I get your mom? And I said, get her whatever I have. That way I can just open the thing up and explain how to use it. And he said, okay, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, this is just one of those problems where, again, I think because people are conditioned to value somebody who charges the highest dollar as having the most knowledge on any given thing, they don't accept free help and then aren't appreciative of free help. They'll criticize free help at every fucking turn. So then you don't even want to fucking do it because you're giving somebody assistance for some shit they're going to come back and blame you for something else for, as if you helping them is what caused the other problem.
holy crap. Our friend Daniel's on fire. I'll just go back to, let's see. He says, most people are gross and unpredictable and rather unpleasant. And then he says, adult onset illiteracy, as I like to say a lot. And they pay unpredictable and gross stranger. Nursing homes are death holes. He says, when a nation claims to care for its most vulnerable population and does nothing to protect them from the eventuality of a pandemic, he says, bullshit. We need to get Daniel a microphone so he can join us, because he was right there with us the whole time.
Yeah, man. I mean, when you have there's so much shit about daycares and nursing homes that I'm not trying to condemn people because they were kind of raised into it, but the destruction of the nuclear family is 100% the fault of capitalism. And then when you have the notion that you can pay somebody to care about your kid or your parent more than you do for 8 hours a day or whatever, so you can go work a fucking job to pay them. People are doing really stupid shit in order to preserve a capitalist lifestyle that ultimately ends up making them think they're doing a valiant effort by staying outside of their home 8 to 12 hours a day to pay somebody else to pretend to care about their fucking family.
So
is what it comes down to.
So for anybody who's been listening to us for the past, I'd say about 6 or 7 months, actually, we've kind of been laying the foundation for a larger dialogue about neo-feudalism and pretty much how this is a reflection of what's being proposed or shown to us. This is the illusion of capitalism, is that it protects a neo-feudal state. And this is what's kind of emerging right now. We're seeing that the jobs that are essential, these are low-wage jobs of populations that, the elites are willing to sacrifice. In LA, it's disproportionately Latino communities that are being affected by this. And these are frontline healthcare workers and all the civil service, civil staff, I guess, who have to go around and keep LA County clean. And it's reflected in other cities where it's black populations or whatever the lower socioeconomic strata is comprised of. But this isn't just, it's happening everywhere. And the jobs that are becoming more stable are service for people who have money, like cleaning jobs and being a personal cook or a personal trainer or a private tutor for their kids. And these are, these will be protected because people who have money don't have time to do these things with their kids and build that relationship with their kids. So they're going to pay somebody else to do it. They're going to pay a stranger to raise their kids. This is a very dangerous frontier, and it's like we're actually leaving a brave new world at this point. We're headed into a much darker place if we're not careful.
Well, I'm looking at this. I wrote a post a year ago. A year ago today, May 17th, 2019. In America, if someone asks you, what do you do? The common response is always relative to a person's employment. In the rest of the world, if someone asks you, what do? You respond with your personal interests like, oh, I like to go bike riding or I like to go mountain hiking. It's a stark existential contrast. Americans literally can only see themselves through the lens of their employer. If you live in a country that's been colonized, you're not just proving my point by saying we do that here too. If you don't live in a post-colonial country and it does this too, please let me hear it. Otherwise, trying to say we do that here too when colonialism has hit your country isn't disproving this culture point. A year later today, when we have unemployment reaching the same levels or surpassing the levels as the Great Depression, and half of America begging to get back to work to preserve an economy that is clearly on its deathbed.
It's choking him to death.
It's a reminder that America has no soul. America as a country has no soul. It was all sold to them. It was all a lie. This whole rebel bullshit. It was actually the rebel thing that goes back to rebelling against the British monarchy. We're still fucking looking at newspapers and magazine stories about Princess Harry, who we can't stop calling the prince or not Princess Harry, Prince Harry, whatever. And Americans can't get over the fucking monarchy in 2020. So clearly we never actually rebelled against the British monarchy when we've been beheld to British banking contracts this entire time, even though we defaulted on a couple bank loans from the British banks. We're still beheld to the British monarchy in a roundabout way, even though they're just a figurehead at this point too. So the British banks have been basically controlling the American population, the British population for the last 500 years. And in that, they've built this narrative that this rebellious spirit is something that's actually quintessentially American, but it was all a fucking lie that's wrapped up in capitalism that's obviously feudal. And we've been talking about this feudalism. So now feudalism is more apparent than ever, and Americans can't stop themselves but trying to reinforce white feudalism.
Yeah. It's just feudalism with technology.
Yep.
And more steps. It's a corollary to the Rick and Morty episode where they had the tinyverse inside the nanoverse inside the miniverse. And,
oh my! Have you seen Solar Opposites, man?
No, not yet.
Oh God, it's like even I bet Americans will hate Solar Opposites because if Rick and Morty was
it's
Justin Roiland.
Yeah, Justin Roiland's show.
Yeah,
I've been wrapped up in files, man. I haven't actually been watching anything new because I don't want to I don't want to pay attention to anything like that. I just want background time.
No, man, you need to start this because the thing I know people in America will hate it because if Rick and Morty was roundabout in talking shit about capitalism, which they've gotten even more direct about in the last couple episodes, Solar Opposites is like hitting it every fucking episode in a way where you're like, oh my God, Americans won't be able to handle this. They won't be able to handle this shit, man.
Well, that's why you gotta make the other. You can't have the other be human. You have to make them an alien because that way it's easier to disparage their ideas or to flat out kill them. I started a Star Wars marathon because of finals because I just wanted some lasers and space noise. And it turned out that I decided to watch it in sequence, and I remembered, oh, wait, there are all these cartoons they made. Well, I'll just inject that there, too. So I'm like almost all the way through the Clone Wars animated series. And it's occurred to me that, the Republic, the Galactic Republic that was involved in the Civil War, ends up championing a religious organization to act as the peacekeepers of the galaxy, which then become the leaders of a intergalactic war, where they're seeking to bring down separatists who don't want to be a part of a corporate, federated, monopoly-driven Senate. They don't want to be a part of that. And so the Republic is going after the Confederacy because they don't want to participate in their aggressive economic activity. But it's also a front for some evil dictator. And then at a point, the Empire turns on the religion and casts the religion out. All the while, there are clones who are then replaced. Before the clones, there were drones that were like the big enemy. there's a generation of kids who are raised thinking drones are the enemy.
Right.
They're always going to think that robots were the enemy because of this. But then they're also taught that you can't trust the government that supports the religion because it'll turn on the religion. And then eventually, even the people that we're supposed to be rooting for turn out to be the bad guys. And then the people that we were championing, like, let's get the separatists, they turn out to become the rebellion. And so there's all these really weird, there's this really strange twist that I'm not sure that, I don't think I was paying attention the first time I watched any of this stuff, because it's still in a world that has rampant slavery.
Right, and I think a lot of people overlook that shit the first time
when the robots are like my master. It's like, what the fuck?
Right. Well, because this is where it's like the shit where people obsess over Boba Fett.
Yeah, but we've talked about that. He's a clone. Like, people were idolizing a clone.
Well, he's a shitty character in the first place.
Well,
and that's where what I'm saying is, like, we have this whole thing in America where people idolize mediocrity in the midst of politically charged situations, which they also ignore. That's like a quintessentially American thing.
Yeah.
For people to be like, keep the politics out of my Star Wars.
Yeah, but
and it's like
Boba Fett's driven by revenge. That's it.
No, but I'm saying, like, the fact that Americans in up to even 2020 still will act like there's no political message in Star Wars because they've been able to ignore it. That's like a quintessentially American thing, to be able to just see something and, like, completely miss the politically charged situation, which is also why you have situations like, I think a lot of people didn't realize how political Alan Moore was when they would read his comic book works, and then were like, keep the politics out of my Watchmen and shit like that. It's like there's so many things where people have missed the political narratives because American culture hyper focuses on everything but the actual political narrative. Like, you remember the Childish Gambino released that "This Is America" video, right? America hyper focused so much on the artistry of the video that the actual point of the video was lost completely. I was worried about that shit when it happened. Everybody was so focused on all of the individual art pieces and all the art set and the set pieces and all. Oh my God, this is such a genius piece of directing, that they lost the fucking point. That's such an American reaction, man.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like, it happens so frequently that you can't even blame people when they miss narratives, because there's so much focus on other things that, like, even Transformers, the focus on the toys, you miss the, like, it's like there's not even a story about a new species. They're not new, but a species trying to coexist after first contact. Like, there's so much of a different narrative there that got lost. I mean, I'm talking about the original animated series.
Yeah.
Like, the narrative, because the Transformers movie, like, if you were a kid and you did not cry when fucking Optimus Prime died, you're probably a sociopath, straight up. It's the same shit with, like, American Tail. There's so many things that if you're a kid and you didn't cry at these certain things, yeah, you probably tried to hide that you were crying. But if you didn't actually cry at those things when you were a kid, you're probably a fucking sociopath. Like, every kid who watched Transformers cried when Optimus Prime died. When the first time they saw that shit happen, yo, that shit was like, that tears you apart as a kid. When you hate Hot Rod for a second for taking the fucking Matrix from Optimus Prime, you're like, no, just give it back to him. Just give it back to him. Don't kill Prime.
When Ultra Magnus fails to open the Matrix, like, and you see Prime's, like, brother just, like, being torn apart, like, that shit's terrifying. That's like,
dude, it rips you apart as a kid. I mean, as an adult, if you probably go back and watch that shit, if you don't cry, you're probably a sociopath.
I think that's the thing, though. It's like there's this whole generation of storytelling that gets lost because, you know, I remember hearing people complain about Transformers, the way that it looked, or He-Man, or any of that stuff. And it's like, they're never going to be able to see the story behind it if they're put off just by the aesthetic. I think there's some stories that are actually more important because they don't focus on the aesthetic itself. And that's the thing, is like when we have something like Transformers, which is completely just filled with details,
Dude,
it's hard to
Orson
ignore
Welles.
that.
Orson Welles is Unicron.
Yeah, man. And Leonard Nimoy is Galvatron.
And Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. It's like this movie had some heavy hitters for the voicing. You can't just like, how do you get over that? And Spock was Galvatron. Galvatron's like the baddest dude outside of Unicron.
Yeah.
When has anyone ever thought that Nimoy was like the baddie? That doesn't compute. That's like that in itself should cause so much cognitive dissonance that people should be like trying to reject it for the first 5 minutes that they see him killing people. And that movie's crazy because they really obliterate Transformers left and right. Like,
yeah, man, that shit. Again, I think that's the first experience a lot of kids had with their heroes just murked, just got taken out. Where you're like, oh shit, I thought the hero's supposed to win. And I think when you learn that like the hero doesn't win every time, that's a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
For a kid to learn, because part of it is like you can't expect the hero just to win because he's the hero. Otherwise, you're gonna have unrealistic expectations throughout your entire life.
Well, I think that's a fairly consistent theme. We've got a culture of people who think that the Disney romance is gonna deliver. And we know that the Disney romance is just a myth. There's no shining prince that's gonna. Well, I guess there is for Meghan Markle, but that's a total anomalous. That's just an outlier. But that's the thing, is that we have a society that's built on fantasies, and our heroes are artificial. They're synthetic. I think that's a problem. We don't have real heroes anymore. We have got this culture that demands so much perfection that nobody can make the cut.
Will Smith and The Rock are the only ones left.
Yeah, seriously.
Fucking Tom Hanks. Somebody protect those motherfuckers. They're the only ones that haven't done some offensive shit yet.
Well, we love Will Smith. We love The Rock, and we love Tom Hanks. Can we get those three into like one movie at some point?
Just put them in a bubble, man. They've already done enough. Put them in a bubble. Don't let any of them say anything offensive or do anything offensive. Just protect those guys from like having their legacies ruined, because fuck, man, all our heroes have had their shit destroyed.
Oh, left
or
and right.
They've destroyed it themselves. Like, it's not even had it destroyed. They did it themselves.
Yeah, that's that culture of the media that wants to just rip everything to pieces because someone's mad at somebody else.
Yeah.
It's
well, but
that's
I think that's the danger of having heroes in the first place. They always say never meet your heroes, man.
Yeah, that's true. Because it turns out that some of them might be like, crack addicts or use like heroin or some other crazy shit that you just don't want to get wrapped up in because, no, thank you, I don't need to kill myself. That shit just blows my mind. And I know that there's like a trade that some people have made. It seems like a lot of rock and roll musicians, especially a bunch of singers, they all decided that they wanted to go to that dark place so they could bring back those kinds of stories, and they did. And then lo and behold, like this, I think the singer from Pearl Jam is the only one who's still standing. And then like the guy that replaced the singer from Stone Temple Pilots, he died too. He checked out too. Like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
He used to be the singer for Linkin Park, Chester Bennington. Yeah, he replaced the singer. He became the lead singer for Stone Temple Pilots, and he had his problems too. It's like there was a culture of musicians that were also wrapped up in drug use that they didn't even survive. Like, Little Richard, he's the king. He just died. He was old, and that dude's like one of the founding fathers of rock and roll. But he had a long career and a long, fruitful, meaningful life. He probably has had great grandkids, I bet. And then there's this big gap now where there's going to be a lot of rock stars who checked out real early. And I know that there's like a 27 club or 26 club or something like that, where a bunch of influential rockers all died in their 20s. But I'm pretty sure there's like a club for every year for some fan out there, because their favorite musician or artist checked out in that year, and that was an important year for them or something. There's all sorts of reasons why these things are become memorable. But we're going to have a generation of rockers who are all gone. And I think that the lesson is clear. You can't do that shit because it'll kill you. Nobody survives. I mean, like, even the super successful ones, eventually they succumb to in-flight pneumonia and die.
I mean, at the same time, a lot of the escapism and self-destruction was to get away from post-slavery industrial capitalism.
Yeah.
And now that we're on the cusp of like getting rid of that, how much will people need to destroy themselves just to get for escapism? So I don't know if those, like, how do you perpetuate that culture when
they kill themselves?
I think that's part of it. Is like the only way to perpetuate that culture is when shit is so dystopian that people need a constant escape. So they need heroin or cocaine or whatever to get away from like the constant fact that America sucks and America makes the world feel like America because of the media.
Well, the Opium Wars were they're not fun to read about when it's happening to your country right now.
Right.
I think that's the real problem. It was one thing to read about it when I was younger and how the British unloaded all that on China, but to see that kind of economic activity and just the way that all that shit was pushed on the population here, it's incredible. Especially now that there's more information coming out about, or the information came out really, but about how they did it, and people are kind of being punished, but I don't think they're actually being punished.
No,
they're just being fined something that they don't have a problem paying, and then they're going to be allowed to go back to business under a new filed name, and it'll be business as usual for them.
I think maybe one person. I don't know if even one person went to jail.
Well, ain't that?
I don't.
So that's another.
Let me look.
That's another aspect of neo-feudalism. At some point, there are people with so much money that they are beyond the reach of the law. That's just like. What at this point it means that laws are only good for people that'll follow them and who don't have enough money to get out of trouble. And if you have enough money that you don't get, if you have enough money that you're never going to get in trouble, then there are no laws.
Man, these motherfuckers got 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and fines.
So what does community service mean? They have to sit at a desk and file some paperwork? Because
I doubt it. I doubt they even fucking had to do it.
I bet they paid somebody to show up and do it for them.
They probably just used one of their NGOs and signed their own papers, man. This is why it's fucking bullshit. Because nobody's making sure they actually. 400 hours community service ain't shit for what they did in the first place. Yeah. Nobody's making sure they're doing that. They're on a yacht somewhere, laughing about it, drinking their fucking bubbly, drinking about and talking about how they got around the system and used their NGO, and it's like, this is fucking neo-feudalism, and Americans are worried about unemployment, people collecting unemployment, and not the fucking Sacklers in the opium civil wars where they're fucking got their cousins and shit hooked on heroin and oxys and methadone and all that shit. Suboxone, whatever it is.
It doesn't even matter what it is.
Whatever it is, nobody who did it is being held accountable, and Americans don't fucking care.
Well, yeah, that's the apathy that allows it to become such a caricature of what's really happening.
Yeah. Again, that's where I'm like, on the one hand, it sucks that people are like in bad times, but on the other hand, fuck America's capitalism, man. This shit is like killing a large segment of the planet. Is killing it's not gonna kill the planet. Is making the planet pissed off at humans, more likely to shake us off like fleas at some point. Because it's some super ass hubris to think that humans can kill the planet, man. I can't get over the fact that humans think that our bullshit ass cars and electricity is gonna kill this planet that's been bombarded by fucking asteroids for millennia. I mean, I don't even know the
Billions
number.
and billions of years.
Billions of years. This
Thank you, Carl
planet is
Sagan.
fine.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do shit to this
No,
planet.
that's the thing. The impacts of meteorites that hit the Earth that caused mass extinctions, like lasting atmospheric conditions that were not conducive to plant life, or over carbonized the ocean, like those were the size of states, like the size of Texas. These were giant rocks that hit the Earth. They weren't tiny.
Yeah, because if a meteorite actually impacts the fucking surface,
It's big.
it doesn't just detonate over, and that's where it's like, yeah.
Well, some of them do explode over the atmosphere because they weren't big enough to hit the ground. But
Right, yeah.
But
that's what I'm saying.
It's like
Like if it actually impacts,
and there are
actual
plenty of
ground.
impacts that happen. You know, they haven't killed off humans in the last 200,000 years, and there have been numerous impacts that they've done. I think it's lead plutonium dating on the resultant quartz, and they know that the quartz is, significantly. It's not old. It's within the last couple 100,000 years. It's beyond the accuracy of carbon dating, but lead plutonium gets us some serious accuracy, I think, is the way it works. That's some science that I've always found really just incredible, like radio carbon dating, or I guess this is radio plutonium dating. But
Yeah, because I think it's what.
that's how they know the moon is older than the Earth, is the lead plutonium dating of quartz.
Yeah.
Lunar quartz. That's a crazy concept.
Oh man.
No, but back to the neophilism. Daniel asks, who will be able to escape from the massive unemployment and homelessness, and how? And will the nation allow it? So here's the thing. Eventually, either that class becomes so just expendable that they die, or the state steps in and creates a more comprehensive welfare state. But that's not really likely to happen until it gets a lot worse, because they need to be able to convert a larger group of people into essentially a new serf class before that can happen, before you can start absorbing people at the very bottom of the economic structure.
Which is all happening so fast that I tend to believe that would have been the strategy and playbook, but things are happening too quickly.
Oh yeah. Well, see,
I think they're actually going to have to implement a social welfare system before the election.
You're absolutely right, and part of that is that the old plan would have worked had they been able to carry it out with expectations for decline in output of agriculture and economic output, and manufacturing has to be consolidated in other places to become more efficient, and all these things. But all of those things hinge on no pandemics.
And consumerism, because the consumerist element is what needs to be continuous for that paradigm to persist.
But part of the
I was gonna say also one of the issues is like the meat shortage. Well,
there's no meat shortage. There's a processing and delivery.
Processing, delivery, inefficiencies. Americans without their meat are gonna become slightly more docile, and they're gonna start like. They won't protest as much. So there's gonna be all these weird effects of like because then those people aren't going to want to convert to veggies as much. So it's basically going to be like the obese population that's also overly vocal about their politics is going to suddenly go on a hunger strike to protest the meat shortage.
Suddenly, a situationally compelled hunger strike.
I see this shit happening right now, man. Because once Wendy's was like, we're not serving hamburgers, like, oh shit, this isn't gonna be the only one that's gonna happen. So once other like McDonald's, like once Americans can't actually get a fucking Big Mac, if they get a limitation put on their Big Macs, there's gonna be this like weird fucking microchip fuse blowing where they're like, America's broken. They're finally gonna realize America's broken, and then they're gonna like, I think that's what's going to
Okay,
trigger some
I'm gonna
shit.
call this illusion the Burger King or the hamburger curtain. No, it's the beef curtain.
The beef
It's
curtain.
the beef curtain. So the beef curtain
Yeah.
is this illusion that everything is fine, but then at some point somebody's gonna ask, "Where's the beef?" and they'll realize that it's not.
Dude, I can take that even further because one of the things that has bothered me for a long ass time is this idea that a double cheeseburger can be cheaper than a fucking apple, and then people will be like, "Oh, it's black people's fault that they can't
Afford the
fucking
apple?
right." And then it's like, no, you put black people in food deserts and make double cheeseburgers apparently cheaper than apples, then people's concepts of food hierarchies are completely thrown off.
Yeah.
And then black people get blamed for not having access to fucking cheap apples.
Hey, in China, you could get a larger vessel of beer than you could of water for the
Yep.
same price. So
Yeah, it happens in a lot of places actually, because of the poor processing plants.
yeah. So you have to get beer to get some clean water, and it's low potency beer. You have to drink it nonstop to catch a buzz, and then it pretty much disappears as soon as you start sweating. But it was cheaper than water, and I never got dehydrated, and so I considered that to be kind of a win. It was a really surreal experience.
Yeah, in Turkey, a coffee or a tea was almost always cheaper than a water. Like in almost every situation, because the water's gonna get boiled in the process.
Yep.
So it's like, I don't think that they were using bottled water to make that shit, and I wasn't getting sick. Nobody else was getting sick, so I'm assuming they weren't using the bottled water to make that shit.
I wonder. I wonder if people who how many times, like when there's a restaurant where someone gets food poisoning, I wonder how many other people were exposed to that E. coli or salmonella or whatever and went home but didn't get sick. Why is it always one person when that happens, you know? Or sometimes it's everyone at a restaurant, actually. I've read about that, where health department gets called in because, you know, everyone got some really nasty food poisoning. So I know that happens, but, like, whenever I've had friends who get food poisoning from a restaurant, like, I never read about, you know, a larger food poisoning thing. It's not like...
I mean, I think people's bodies just react differently.
That's what I
So,
mean.
for example, like,
So,
you know, my body apparently reacts to sugar or fried food, like alcohol. Like, I made some funnel cake last night at 1 o'clock, and my body treated it like I had drank a 12-pack or some shit.
oh, so you were just like, woo, on the internet?
I mean, no, like
Oh.
puking.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, not fun at all.
Well, that's like the opposite of
That's
what
what
I
I'm
thought that
saying.
was going.
No, it treats it like poison.
Shit, because I can eat, like, I could probably eat...
That's what I'm saying. My body just treats that shit like completely differently.
yeah.
Like, in a way where there's no eggs in it. There was nothing that should have made me puke, except for the fact that my body, it just rejects a lot of oil or sugar.
Yeah.
Either or. It just straight reject it.
Man, it's crazy, because I've been on this stir-fry wok kick since, you know, March. And so, you know, 3 or 4 times a week I'll cook something in the wok. And I you know, I realize that I use more oil than I need to a lot of the time. And I've been trying to dial it down and trying to figure out that, like, you know, just enough amount of oil to do the amount of vegetables that I've prepared, or just to do the meat, and then to preserve enough of it so that I can do the vegetables, you know, that kind of thing. And it's you know, hopefully I feel like I'm getting closer because the food's getting less oily, but and there's less sauce actually. That's a whole different part of it. But you know, I found periods of time where it's like I couldn't. It just made me really sick. But then there are other times where it's like it didn't seem to bother me. Like and I'm sure that there are a lot of, you know, nobody can have like an identical gut.
No, God, no.
And nobody, like, even if they did, I'm sure they would have like slight variation in their bodily pH. And
Well, but this is where people doing fecal transplants is how they alleviate some people's like intestinal problems. Like some people will get it's like they'll have irritable bowel syndrome or issues processing certain foods, and they'll get a fecal transplant from somebody else, and it'll help their issues. But
See, that's really cool.
You know,
That's like borderline magic healthcare.
right. I mean, there's a lot about the body that's still just so enigmatic, but this is still the notion of Western science having the final say on shit that other science communities in other countries have been saying for a long time.
Yeah.
And the same shit, like, how the people in Madagascar are being ignored right now because the people in the West are acting like they have the final say on all science.
They announced the first coronavirus death today, or maybe it was yesterday, or sometime in the morning today, or last night. I don't know, but I read about it earlier this morning that Madagascar finally announced their first death or first casualty. And this is interesting because Madagascar has been producing this tonic from like a local nut or berry, or it's like a tea, and you drink this stuff, and it just promotes all sorts of health benefits. Why don't we have this in America?
Because then you heard about the death. Do you know how old the person was?
No, didn't even say.
Because then it's like,
like I saw it on the world meters first, and then I saw a headline, but at that point it's like it's already up. I don't need to read about it. I know that Madagascar has been doing a great job at providing the necessary services to their population to keep everything functioning properly.
Yeah, because then I think Mauritius has also.
I think that Mauritius I think they had like a mini, not really a spike, more like a little blip of cases, but then I think they contained it.
Yeah,
I think they're down to like.
They've declared it
contained.
No more cases, because it's been
like a month or something.
April 27th since the last time they've reported any case.
That's almost a month.
Yeah, almost a month.
Yeah,
it was like April 15th where it had been a couple days.
Yeah,
that they reported no new cases. Then it got a couple.
For people that don't know where Mauritius is, it's in the Indian Ocean, kind of between Madagascar and India, closer to the African continent, I think.
Yep.
And it's a very technologically rich country. There's a lot of intelligence there, and a lot of forward-thinking and creative people who are doing pretty interesting things. And it's also quite pretty. Like, I encourage everyone to go look for pictures of Mauritius. You'll see that it's got like a rainforest. They've got I think multiple national parks. It's definitely the kind of place where you imagine like a paradise.
I think that's the place where they have the underwater waterfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, at least one of the places.
Yeah. They have I think they have a volcano. Also.
Yeah, it's an active. I walked around the edge.
Yeah, so they've got like all sorts of water features that are accessible to humans, where you won't just get swept out into the ocean and die. They've got an active volcano. They've got multiple parks, like national parks, forestry. One's a legit tropical rainforest. and they've got all the modern trappings of an information-rich society.
Yeah, because then like Mauritius is where one of the places where you'll just walk up on a macaque and like you'll just be standing next to a macaque because they just hanging. There's like a temple where they protect them and shit. But like you'll just be standing in a park next to a fucking macaque, and it's like you got to be on your shit. But
yeah, those little monkeys will take anything they can get their hands on.
Oh yeah, no, I saw one. Jack, dude was eating a pineapple, and this macaque just took his shit and was like, "What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it?" And just kind of stared at him and was like, "Well, that dude ain't.
He's not getting
should've
his
been-
pineapple back.
Yeah, he was kind of, waving it in the monkey's face in the first place. It's like, well, that's what you get. Like, you're being dumb, dude. I'm not taking food that I'm not trying to hand out to a fucking monkey. But
Imagine getting pwned by a monkey.
Yeah.
That's pretty low on the list of things that you want to walk away from.
yeah, well, because I was you just be like, we were standing in a parking lot talking to somebody, and look over, it's like a wild boar there. And you're like, okay.
Guys, we need to go inside. It's like, no, it's cool.
No, man, yeah. And they were just like, no, don't worry about it. He just ate. And he was all like sluggish and shit. So. But, yeah, man. I think that's kind of where, this is one of the things I want to talk about. In America, you can only fetishize nature when you're disconnected from it. And when you live in a place like Mauritius where they don't actively try to disconnect from nature, you don't have to fetishize it because it's like part of your existence.
Yeah.
So that's where Americans are so quick to try to disconnect from nature again. They're like, oh, how can we turn up the disconnect? Let's go to drive-in movies in our cars, drive-in concerts in our cars. Let's drive everywhere. Let's go to the park in our cars. Just drive through the park and
So my parents live in a part of town where there's like an active deer population that just walks around, and they are bold. They walk up to animals like people's dogs that are laying out in the yard. They'll just walk up and lay down and hang out. My parents' cat, often I've seen that cat touching noses to deer and then laying around in the yard with them. It's really kind of surreal.
I lived in that part of town for a while. It's like a specific part of town. Yeah.
And it's when I was younger, it was fairly common to wake up and there'd be a deer right outside the window chewing on something. And I guess that's cool. I didn't have a problem with it. I wasn't gonna shoot it or anything, because what the fuck am I gonna do with a deer now that I've done something stupid like killed it? But I think that's part of wildlife management or wilderness management. Those things are only necessary in urban environments.
I mean, only if you build the urban environment away from nature.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm saying is it's not necessary in an urban environment if your design goes with nature, i.e. why
we gotta have
pyramids still exist.
You have to have some kind of way for animals to cross streets.
Exactly. They have animal highways that don't have them. They haven't built them yet. It's the same shit. Humans shouldn't be crossing the same plane as cars. All walks should be, if we have vehicles driving on a street, all the footpaths should be on a different plane. Yep. That's how they do it in Vegas. Yep. It's just something that humans accept poor design because
old infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, because their parents
not just old, but like
way, and the grandparents did it a certain way.
Well, our road lanes are the width they are because that is common to the road widths in England, which were designated by Roman carts. Yeah. And so, if we're relying on vehicles that have a wheelbase and track width of a Roman cart, let's think about that. That's like 2,000 years old probably. There may have been a couple hundred more years of design improvement over these things, but they maintain the same track. All of our cart and vehicular designs come from ancient Rome. That's sad. Like the foundations. We can come up with better things, like better designs. I mean, surely we can. We can send robots to Mars. We can send a capsule to fly through the rings of Saturn continuously for years, and send us data and show us awesome pictures of stuff, and then dive into the planet to destroy itself. We can do all that. We can make vehicles that are better, that don't have to come at such a huge environmental cost.
And the craziest shit about all those things that you named off is that somehow people will say that shit happened because of capitalism. There is nothing profitable about anything that you just named off.
Nope.
There's no profit in any of that shit.
Nope.
But somehow people will try to say capitalism did that. It's the most cultish.
I think those things were made possible because of the military, and that's like the most socialist institution that the United States has.
Yeah.
Because it's not the military that develops the technology. They have somebody in the private sector do that. They have Raytheon do it. They have Lockheed Martin do it. They have Northrop Grumman do it. You know, insert some industrial military complex manufacturer developer name, but those are the people that are doing it. Not the Army or Air Force or Space Force. They're gonna have, you know, a team of engineers in a room in a different state, you know, 3 floors down below into the sub basement. Like, that's who's going to be developing this stuff. But otherwise, our military is pretty much a big, incredible socialist organization.
But that's too complex of a framing for most people. You know, again, this gets back to.
But that's how it really is. I mean, if anything, the only reason that consumerism is involved is because people have to buy stuff to generate tax revenue for the government to assign to military and science expenditures, and the military gets a huge budget, and so in a sense that's kind of good for the development of certain technologies, but it seems that a lot of those technologies get used to kill people. So it's like maybe the scientists that helped develop Juno were able to get the money and funding for all of that because their rocket telemetry program was really sophisticated, and that was used for to create next generation guidance systems or something, or telemetry control systems for a rocket or a drone. Because if we can control a freaking robot on Mars with a 20-minute delay, then I'm pretty sure that we can control a drone on Earth with like near instantaneous real-time control.
I mean, yeah.
Mars is fucking far away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really far away. All of these planets are far away.
I mean, yeah. And again, this just gets back to, you know, the notion that we have to even control the robot is some colonial shit. That's where, at a certain point, we build the robots to control themselves because the delay is too long.
Because they can get more done on their own time.
Exactly.
We don't need to micromanage a robot that's been programmed to do something.
Exactly.
Holy shit!
That's such a colonialist paradigm, man. Like, we make sure the robot's doing the right thing and following protocol.
Well, it can only do what it's programmed to do, right? These bastards.
Yeah. No, man. I think, you know, this gets back to testing. Now people, I think, are finally starting to realize testing is only to keep people conditioned to have their work being constantly monitored as something that's like normal. If you're an adult, you shouldn't have somebody looking over your shoulder to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Whether that's taking a test, not using resources. But even then, the idea that somebody in 2020 doesn't have access to resources, or that you can make an academic argument without resources, it makes no fucking sense. So testing without a book, that doesn't even make sense in 2020. Or testing without Google.
Yeah.
Ask better questions.
You know,
ask non-multiple choice shit.
I remember having to take.
Problem with tests.
I remember taking math classes where you needed a graphing calculator, and you didn't just need a graphing calculator. You needed to know how to use the graphing calculator. And I'm pretty sure that half the people that I met had no fucking clue what they were doing. They were just following the steps in the book as they went along, or in the notes as they went along, and that's probably why they couldn't do that stuff then. But I also remember having to take tests where you weren't allowed to use your calculator. And it's like, wait a second, you guys just taught me how to use this really complicated thing. You're not going to let me use it now? I see, it's going to be like that. And I ended up taking that class a second time. But, you know, I got through it. It was because I approached it the wrong way. The first time through, I just learned how to use the damn calculator.
Mm-hmm.
I also programmed it to play Tetris, and that was pretty rad.
Yeah, I mean,
That was
well,
that was like a rite of passage.
First experience with coding is that calculator.
My first,
once you, I was gonna say, once you realize that you can do stuff on there that you aren't necessarily supposed to be able to do, then I think that makes you start to understand back-end modification.
I discovered my cousin's, I think it was an Amiga. No, it was a Commodore. It was some real old funky Commodore, but I remember finding it in my grandma's basement in a box, like stuffed behind other boxes. And I couldn't figure out how to do anything because it just had a flashing cursor. And then I opened up a notebook and I started like entering what I saw in the notebook, and when I hit enter, Space Invaders appeared. And that was the only one that I could get to work. I didn't have any concept of like copy and paste back then, so it took a while. That was actually one of the most thrilling computer experiences I've ever had. But it's not really like that anymore. I've seen like app editors, and they're all WYSIWYG, and it's all objects that you can just grab out of a list of objects, and then you tell it what to do, and it creates some kind of smart link of some sort. But that's very different. That was a very different experience from hitting keys with, the best part about that keyboard is it had shapes on it that I didn't recognize then, and I'm not sure I would recognize them now. Mm-hmm. They were like for a completely foreign language. That was part of the fun.
Yeah, and that
I don't do that stuff anymore.
Element of computer coding is weird because it went through this period of transitioning from like punch cards to syntax, and then in the process, the people who were doing punch cards are still around in a lot of cases. So like what people consider to actually be coding is a lot dependent on when they were born.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because then you have kids. The thing about form versus function, it's like if you're focused on the end, then the means aren't necessarily that important. But then if you're worried about the means as a connoisseur of the craft, then that is going to dictate what determines the quality before you even look at the piece itself. So this is why I look at all these kids growing up making TikToks. They're all doing visual editing, not realizing or caring what they're doing in a way that is going to make people like Michael Bay look juvenile in like 30 years. I mean, people consider Michael Bay to be juvenile because they hate on it. But as far as actual visual construction of action sequences, he created his own style, which became ripe for mockery because it is his own style, which is why people hate on it. So when we talk about how that evolved, you couldn't have people making fun of Michael Bay style editing if he hadn't articulated his own style. But now that kids are doing jump cuts and edits on their cell phones, like that editing is going to have to be so complex in 30 years to actually be worth note that it's going to really we're going to influence, or the kids are influencing the complexity of film for decades to come, but people don't even connect those things because it's like it doesn't seem like they're connected.
Yeah. Well, you reminded me of John Woo. Like, that guy's got his own style of action. I mean, it's a John Woo action flick or a John Woo action scene. When it includes their name, it's pretty much solidified.
Or doves.
Or yeah.
Anytime you include doves, you're doing a John Woo throwback illusion.
Every rap video from the early 2000s. Every rap video from the early 2000s.
John Woo fucking he cemented that shit. Anytime there's like
that
birds just randomly flying.
And Chow Yun Fat randomly flying.
Right. Yeah. Um, well, he's one of the people that made wire work cool again,
Yeah.
and that's kind of
Well,
where
his wire work wasn't Chinese opera. It was.
I mean, it kind of was
Well, I
though.
know, but it was different from. It wasn't people like flying around holding some Tai Chi pose. It was.
Oh yeah, I see what you're
It
saying.
was.
But
It inserts an element of hyperrealism that that puts the viewer on the edge of their seat, and you find yourself just like holding on, like, oh, what's gonna happen? Oh my goodness! The next thing you know, the scene's over, and you completely relax in your seat. And some people pass out. I've seen this in movie theaters where people are like so tuned into the action sequence that they like completely just stop blood flow for just long enough, hold their breath for just long enough. And I always thought that was incredible. It's like, I wonder where you have to sit in a movie theater to have the optimal like sonic and visual experience for that kind of thing to happen. And what other kind of physiological conditions would you have to be experiencing like in that moment to
I
have
think that kind of person just they probably have a defense mechanism where if they have sensory overload, their body just shuts down.
oh wow.
I don't think it has anything necessarily to do with film. It's like there's just certain people who, if they have sensory overload, they just shut down, and it's like, film could do it. Being, in a crowd could do it. This is where shit like agoraphobia, um, or a lot of the things that autistic people experience to then make them have negative experiences have to do with sensory overload and not being able to handle all of what their senses are telling them at the same time, and it just shuts them down. Uh,
Well, that's like less fun than being like waylaid by the movie.
right, yeah, that's kind of where, again, it's like I would assume, based on my understanding of like
The
physiology
blockbusters
and
and
tandem with like stimuli, that it's probably actually just a defense mechanism. Because like, so for example, when some people see blood, they faint for
oh
whatever
yeah,
the
or some people
cause.
puke when they see somebody else puke.
Right, yeah, there's
Yeah.
shit like that. So like, that shit happens to me, and it only happens at a certain level if I see my own blood, and it doesn't even matter if it hurts. But it's like I had a what was it called? I was carrying a cart, and like the cart, like the basket went through my fingernail, and like it didn't necessarily hurt, but seeing the like thing poking through my fingernail, it like made my blood pressure drop, and like I couldn't move, and it was like one of these things where it's like it didn't even hurt necessarily, because like it was just a matter of like seeing the injury. It's like, oh, you're injured, blood pressure drop, because
So-
then it's like it's rushing to try to compensate for that injury and pushing blood to a certain spot.
I
It's like
remember
my
I
body
had
becomes aware.
I had a deli slicer incident that severed the tendon on my right thumb, and I was like very grateful for my for Boy Scout first aid training, because I immediately grabbed an orange and put it in my armpit and held my arm down to reduce blood flow to my hand and wrapped it up. And then they took me to the emergency room and stitched me up, only later to find out that the tendon was not connected. And I think the thing that kept me calm was having been given instructions and like how to do something like that.
What I'm telling you, there's a biological response.
There's also a
that
biological response.
the instructions don't matter.
Yeah.
Like some people
We'll just
like,
pass out.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like it's like you can't instruct people around it, and when you don't have it, you'll think, well, you just learn these things. Like, no, it's not something you can like
Well, that makes sense, because
be
like
instructed
the
out
first
of.
the first car
It's
accident,
like a biological response.
the first collision that I was involved in, I remember the entire thing. And then the second one, I was like, my head was turned, and I got this really weird like left half paresthesia, So half of my body was all pins and needles, and the right half was fine. And that was a really surreal experience. And that one apparently I was knocked out. But I think that a lot of that had to do with the angle that my neck was at. And then like the resulting nerve trauma that I experienced.
Because again, like when your body goes in shock,
Yeah.
you can like alleviate some of it, but your body is literally in shock. So there's nothing like you can tell yourself to stop your body from being in shock. And that's kind of where like I slammed my finger in a door one time, and when I had to open the door to physically release my finger from it.
Ugh.
And like once that happened, like I had enough adrenaline to get the door off my finger, but once like I got my finger out, I started vomiting. Like I couldn't not vomit.
Wow.
Like that's what I'm saying. You can't like when you start vomiting,
that's like a different level of physiological response.
Yeah, so I'm saying that's where like when you reach it, you don't know what that point is for your body, but once you reach it, there's nothing you can talk yourself out of
to get past that threshold.
And that's why I'm saying like
so maybe
it's like
maybe
everybody doesn't have that response.
Yeah, so maybe the person in the theater just has an exceptionally low physiological response threshold.
Yeah.
Huh.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's what I'm saying.
That's gotta. I guess it's
which is also why some people need more stimulus to get enjoyment. So like the person who's like, oh, this is boring, I'm gonna go to IMAX. That person's on the opposite end of the scale.
Yeah,
they need way more stimulation to even get enjoyment.
Yeah.
It's like there's
they have a higher threshold for interest.
Yeah. Or it's not even interest, it's stimulation. Yeah. It's literal they may the decibels may not be loud enough, there may not be enough color, there may not be enough contrast, there may not be enough photons. It may not have anything to do with the storyline. It's literal physical stimulus.
Yeah.
That is not, they don't have enough stimulus to keep them
engaged.
It's not even engaged, it's their blood. Like their body needs a certain amount of stimulus to keep their blood pressure at a certain level to keep them capable, or they'll fall asleep. Like to be capable to be engaged. And this is why some people sleep in class.
That's funny. That's like I've fallen asleep in movies before. It took me I feel like I saw the movie Adaptation 3 times, and I forgot every time that I had seen it. Like when I go to the movie theater, like, Will Ferrell, I'm gonna go check this out. And then one day I was going through all my movie stubs, and I had like, a lot of them. That was a terrible movie. It was not. Yeah, it just occurred to me that that's happened to me before. I've fallen, and not for other reasons, for passing out in a movie theater. Come to think of it, none of those movies would have been good anyways. So. Oh yeah. When I was in my early 20s, I went to the movie theaters a lot. I really liked going to the movies. Like, I remember seeing Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings. When that movie came out, I went and saw that, and the theater was packed, and I was sitting off to the side, and they just kept going on. It was like ending number 4 out of 7 from Fellowship. And it's just like I couldn't take it anymore. I just got up and started leaving, and right as I get to the door, it ended. What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And that was it. And I had enough. I was done with that movie before it was over. But not that much.
Like you said, there was 4 endings. Some of these movies where they're epic is the same shit with Endgame. They'll have 4 endings where you're like, okay, we were done a half an hour ago, guys. Why are we still here? But there's this over romanticization of the prologue, or I guess the epilogue,
Well, it's
And
not enough
like,
to to the end of the story. You have to know how they turned out later.
yeah.
Were they psychologically stable afterwards? Did they have a normal life?
Yep.
Probably.
It's like the illusion of creating a happily ever after. If they don't want to do a sequel for the franchise, and that's kind of where again is, capitalism has made storytelling into this.
You know what? I want to call some bullshit on the end of Endgame. Fucking when old Captain America appears and gives what's his name, Falcon the shield. That means that his ass was hanging out the whole time. There were two Captain America. There was a Captain America floating around the entire time that wasn't doing anything, or he was, and nobody figured it out.
Well, but he said he wanted to live with Peggy, so they said it. But I get it too, and that's kind of where it's like.
That's like, wait a second, yeah, but really, Captain America he's not able to stand idly and watch some horrible shit happen. It's just
he would have been like 120 though, like even before.
No. I know, that's what I mean though. But he would have been there from like the 40s all through.
So I'm saying he would have been super jaded, like that. This guy is over intervening and having humans fuck up anyway, and I can totally see that guy being like, I just want to fucking hang out with Peggy.
So he's like, he's the anti-captain at that point.
He is, and that's kind of where I understanding how many times humans just fucked up fixing or fucked up whatever the Avengers just fixed. I can see why at a certain point he's like, yeah, I just want to hang out with Peggy. Peggy, let's just dance. Like
I don't even like those people anyways.
Right, yeah.
Like,
because even when Sam was like, you want to tell me? He's like, no, I don't like you. And that's exactly how he said it too, man. Yeah. No. So that's kind of where, it's funny because that's how I read that moment. Where he's just like an old man that's over it just completely. So that's kind of like. But then, knowing House of M, they're probably going to go back and find that dude and be like, Steve, you can't just sit on the sidelines. And then we're going to learn why.
Yeah.
I hope.
Well,
I feel like Kevin Feige's smart enough to do that.
Hopefully they turn him into like Business Rogers. And he goes and he's like one of the guys from Mad Men and just like drinks a lot and gets to go through all the ages and change into whatever anti-Captain America character he can become, because I think that's like an interesting direction for him. I think that's the only real way to explore that character anymore, because it's like we get it, he's like wholesome, can pick up Mjolnir and operate it like Thor. We get it. He's like the best that America's ever produced. He's also, the product of bioengineering. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and I think one of the problems with the way that Captain America was written in the comic books, he does do that and does really question everything America says is stood for, but in Civil War they kind of make it. I mean, and Winter Soldier for that matter. It's like it's less about questioning America
and more about Tony being drunk.
Right, and that's kind of where I can see. And even in the, they took out the demon in the bottle storyline. So they kind of nerfed a lot of the shit with both of these characters that they could have done to get some of the more complex shit. But I get it. But at the same time, that's why I think potentially they could set it up, especially with U.S. Agent becoming the bad guy. So. Maybe they will explore this with U.S. Agent in the Falcon Winter Soldier storyline. And I think there was a rumor that old Steve Rogers does pop up, so maybe we will get answers to these burning questions.
Oh, that's great. No, what was it? I'm still kind of excited for the way that it's going to turn out. Like the Phase 4. It seems like there's a there's still a lot of hope on my end that we're going to get some really good storytelling out of that universe, and they didn't like burn themselves out on the, what is it, like now it's like 48 hours or whatever. I think it's 48 hours of MCU movies. I hope that they're going to be able to like do something interesting with that universe and keep going.
Oh yeah, and I think now that they have pretty much all of the properties consolidated, obviously the Hulk is kind of in this weird space, but they're gonna be able to tell the larger story arcs that they really
Only hinted at.
well, they hinted at them, but I think now is actually just the proper time. I don't think America was ready. I think the world was, the world is obviously way ahead mentally of America concerning the capacity to handle complex stories. But I think the youth in America are at a point where they're ready. And they're able to handle like celestial level storylines, because celestial level storylines don't matter if you think God only cares about blessing America and nowhere else. Like, you don't care about the fucking Kree if you only care about America.
Yeah.
You really can't.
Well,
the Skrulls,
the
you can't care
and the
about the
Skrull are
Skrulls.
dimensionless if you only care about America.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean. Like, that storyline doesn't matter to somebody who's too wrapped up in nationalism.
Yeah.
And you can't, somebody who really, really cares about nationalism can't explore Captain America's distrust in the American system without hating Captain America then. That storyline is completely inaccessible to a nationalist.
I wonder, do Batman fans like Captain America? Generally, I wonder.
And and what's crazy about Batman is, like, have you heard of the Merciless storyline?
No.
So there's this
Merciless
storyline where he gets.
Is he like running around with guns in this one?
No. It's like a completely, like, this Bruce Wayne basically ends up getting the power of Ares and becomes like a demigod, but is also not a good guy because this is an alternate universe. So this is kind of one of those storylines where it's like, man, the Bruce Wayne Batman character is so boring now. There's so many other ways that we need to explore Bruce Wayne. And again, it's like, when you look at what Bruce Wayne basically represented, I think a lot of the romanticism of Batman was wrapped up in the fact that we kind of didn't have super complex characters growing up as a kid. And now that comic books have come so far, Batman is boring as fuck, man. I hate to say it, but I'm bored. I'm bored with Batman.
Well,
I'd rather have the merciless Bruce Wayne.
I don't think
and
that,
explore that or something along those lines.
I think they tried to make Bruce too many things when he became a super genius and was able to figure out, everyone's weaknesses and then create secondary plans in case his main plan to defuse that super person like fails, and like I think they went too far when it's like, oh yeah, I've been planning this giant watchtower thing for years that somehow nobody noticed floating around in space above Gotham City. Like, really? Oh, by the way, it has teleportation capabilities that I haven't released to the rest of the world. I could completely revolutionize transit anywhere on Earth, but I don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of, I think that's the version of Bruce Wayne that once people start thinking about, like, what kind of person consolidates that much wealth and technology when
sycophants.
when they're being when it's that technology is being developed because of the consumerism that their companies create.
Yep, he's a sycophant, and I think we've all slowly realized that we've been romanticizing a sycophant that could have effectively ended poverty, but didn't get rid of poverty so he could have this hero fantasy where he's saving Gotham from crime, when all he had to do was fucking get rid of poverty. Bruce Wayne could have ended poverty single-handedly, but he didn't.
Yeah.
So that's where
Bruce Wayne's a multi-billionaire. He has so much money he can burn down his estate and then rebuild it, and like doesn't even put a dent in his wealth.
He does all this shit for vanity that we were made to romanticize because of the proxy romanticism of billionaires in our culture. This is like, to me, some seed planting so billionaires would like be protected from the fucking pitchforks and torches, because everybody deep down hopes they'll become Batman, but really we just get fucking pitiful baby men like Elon Musk who do these fucking self-indulgent projects that don't do shit for the rest of humanity, but then people who love Bruce Wayne to death will put Elon Musk on a pedestal, even though he doesn't give a fuck about people, man. Elon Musk does not give a fuck about people. Like, I don't know how long it's going to take people to realize that shit. That man gives way more fucks about his legacy than human beings. And that's dangerous for somebody to have all that money and that little care about human civilization as a unit. But, you know, again, this gets to me to like, I have to analyze as an adult a lot of the things that I was looking at in media and learning about as a kid, where it's like, you know, even T'Challa, like, I'm not going to sit here and act like T'Challa is this 100% perfect role model either, because he does a lot of stupid shit in the comic books and the movies too. So this isn't about the billionaire being white or anything like that, because as a multi-billionaire, T'Challa doesn't do enough either. But this again gets back to romanticizing monarchs, romanticizing people controlling large sums of capital, making decisions in the name of people when they could have been doing more. And that we're supposed to be giving them pats on the back for doing a fucking tenth of the things that they could be doing. And all this shit is made to be like, oh, these people are fucking royal kings. And like, even though, I mean, obviously, like, this is a fictional character, but then you go look at the King of Thailand. What the fuck is this dude doing? He's holed up with a bunch of concubines, fucking his brains out while everybody's dying. So fuck monarchs, man. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if we don't analyze what this media has us doing as like byproducts of like all the conditioning of like, oh yeah, eventually some of these people could become Batman. No, the fuck they're not. This is some fantasy shit that they fed us to make us not go after them when we're in a fucking pandemic and they're becoming trillionaires. Everybody should be,
dude.
Like, everybody should be fucking livid that Jeff Bezos is on the verge of becoming a trillionaire while we have record unemployment and this Amazon destroyed economy, because Amazon is what destroyed the mom and pop shit in a lot of cases. So
people are spending, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars on homes and hundreds of millions of dollars on yachts. $200 million 414-foot octopus yacht.
Mm-hmm. So they can get away from us and let us fight amongst ourselves over who's getting unemployment. Who's getting that unemployment? Why are y'all getting unemployment when you're getting more than the essential workers? This is the stupidest shit, man. I keep seeing fucking Americans saying this shit like, oh my God. It's like nobody's good at math and nobody can math anymore, man.
And
people are fighting over who's getting unemployment.
Yeah, well, neoliberalism or neo-feudalism. Well, that's what they're these are the same people that were complaining that somebody should get a minimum wage of $15, and they said, why
Right.
should a burger flipper make more than my what a paramedic? Why should a burger flipper make more than a paramedic? And the question should be, why is a paramedic making less than $15 an hour to begin with? Why aren't they making $20 an hour?
Oh my
Shouldn't our
God.
EMTs already be making like really good money for having to be exposed to like blood and chemicals and idiots and who knows?
And then when you try to ask the proper questions, it's like they can't fathom those questions. Like, oh, what do you mean shouldn't an EMT be making more? Like, I thought we were just debating why an EMT is making the same as a burger flipper. So now when we discuss why the EMT is making so much, you get upset? These people are so fucking conditioned to I don't even know what the word is, disempower the frontline workers or the people who do blue collar work that they have deemed non-essential or only necessary to have a high school degree. Because let's think about this. A lot of these jobs were like considered for teenagers before, because it's like, oh, if you only have a high school degree or less, then you go flip burgers. And that's why it's okay to pay you $7 an hour because you only have a high school degree. So there's all these things about disenfranchising blue collar frontline workers, because then it's the same people who'll be like, well, I install HVACs and I'm a plumber and I need certification to do my blue collar work. So then they reinforce this like blue collar pseudo intellectual structure where they're like, well, you don't need a degree to flip burgers, but you kind of should, because we have like culinary school. It's like,
there's a robot that flips burgers at a cost of $3 an hour. No, it
Right.
makes $3 an hour in terms of like what it costs over time. I think is what how the math works. It generates money by flipping burgers. In its lifetime, it will have paid for itself and then some, and it can flip burgers the entire time. We don't need a human to do that if there's a robot burger flipper.
no, I mean, but at the same time, so that framing reduces it to like so many tangible things, like, oh, it's this many things per hour, but how is it seasoned? And then on top of that, who made the recipe? So there's all these things about like, well, a robot can't flip a burger if it doesn't learn a recipe. So who creates the recipe? How much does that person get paid for the recipe? Does that person get a royalty every time that burger gets flipped?
I think that the recipe would be some kind of complex chemical.
I mean, but hold on.
And those
I'm
things
saying
those are constantly
there's like,
reviewed through some kind of focus group where they
but I'm
regularly.
saying those things are like not discussed when these, like, I know the robots you're talking about, like the story that was presented was focusing on the $3 per hour,
I thought
but
that
it
was
does
funny.
that paradigm doesn't give a fuck about how the burger tastes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, quality is something that robots can't do.
Yeah.
You can't have a robot determine quality, because that's all like quality. Like, I've worked on automation for over a decade, and what everything in the field always points to is that quality is a human metric that always changes. Quality is never static.
Yeah.
So you can't automate quality in any system. So if we're talking about automating hamburgers, yeah, you can automate so much of it, but the quality control will always be human. So when we're talking about the cost per hour, this is removing how much people care about the quality for the sake of saying, well, we don't need a human in the process because we don't care about quality, we don't care about dollars per hour. And that's how capitalism removes like quality out of the process. And that's where, I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
like-
I've had like vending machines, ramen, really complex vending machine ramen, and that was pretty good. And that was kind of a robot.
somebody made the recipe. The robot
Sure.
didn't make, like, that's why I'm saying, like, even though the robot spit it out, it's the same with chefs and line cooks. The line cook isn't the one who made the recipe. The chef creates the recipe, and then the line cook reproduces it every single time. So there's effectively no difference between a line cook and a robot. A robot can only be a chef if a chef programs the robot to create recipes. So ultimately, a robot can never be a chef without a human input in the first line of creating that recipe book. No matter what makes it, the chef is always going to be a human.
Yeah.
Even if it's Watson that's taking recipes accumulated from the internet, a human is the one that made those original recipes, even though it becomes the aggregator. So that's what I'm saying. Like, every process where it comes to determining quality, there's no place a robot can ever be automated to do that without being programmed by a human. It just isn't impossible. It's a paradox of the quandary of the moving metric of quality.
Yeah.
And this is like, I had to study for a long time to get to that point, because I went in thinking that you could automate anything. I didn't have that point of view when I went in.
Well, I don't think that it can just create anything. Like the ramen in a box is like a bunch of ingredients that it spits out from little packets. Like inside those things, it's like a conveyor belt of packets of material.
But those proportions were created by somebody. It doesn't.
Well, that's what I mean.
Like, come up with those proportions.
No, that's. I don't think that's the point of it. I think the point is that it allows you to engage a bunch of different things, and it'll only put in what you tell it to, and then it spits it out in a way that has been determined by a focus group to, like, this is how the meat should be cooked. This is how how tender the noodles need to be. This is how hot the final liquid should be when it comes right out. But I think that's like the result of an ongoing process.
But what you're talking about is a reactive machine versus an interactive machine. So a chef is interactive in that you can give them requests and they can change their input.
Well, that'd be even better.
A vending machine can't.
You just like. Well, that's the thing is it's. I mean, I call it a vending machine, but it's like a robot cook that contains all of the stuff inside of it.
But I'm articulating the difference between a vending machine and a robot cook is that a vending machine, once you're interacting with it as a customer, it's reactive because you can't program the recipes. If you can program the recipes, that's the difference between being interactive and reactive.
Oh, sure.
In that it's like the back end is modifiable, and that's why, like, a robot cook that you can't change your requests, that's simply a reactive machine. And that's where, again, like, there's going to be robot chefs where the only requests that you can make are like the toppings and certain things. You can't ask them to, like, do other things.
Oh no, you'll only be able to remove components from it. That's the future of a fully vended food delivery mechanism that's not a replicator.
Yeah, and again, even so, the replicator is a great example because even then, people had to go in and program the recipes in the replicator. Like,
oh yeah, that's right.
Every time, because that's where.
So I watched Enterprise for the first time in my life finally because it kept recommending it to me. And I thought maybe if I watch it, it won't recommend it to me again, and that's kind of a weird way to go about doing it. But at one point, it occurred to me there's a chef who's like an identified character on that show the entire time. He's like, oh, I'll have the chef send you the recipe. It's like, what the fuck? Seriously? And then that's when it occurs to me, it's like, oh yeah, they have to have a way to add various culinary traditions to the food synthesizer.
Yeah, because this is where they discuss it in Voyager a lot, where Neelix's handmade stuff has a different taste than the replicated stuff, and different people prefer different versions. Like, some people like the replicated stuff, some people like the handmade stuff better. But even then, there would be shit like the tea recipe. They would go in and I think the Earl Grey tea recipe was like modified at some point because Picard didn't like it the way it was replicated. Or I don't know if it was tea or something, but
I think he wanted
to make illusions.
I think he had like really specific temperatures.
Right. I mean that too, but I'm talking about they'll go in and modify the recipe because they'll talk about how the replicator version has something that's slightly off from what it is, and they need to modify it. Like,
Well, I think that just makes for good use of the tools that you have in front of you. Like, I think that should be that would be that's obviously the future of cuisine, like, or the development of science fiction cuisine is like, how do we balance replicated food and like make it taste right? There's got to be a lot of fine tuning, like a whole hell of a lot of fine tuning.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that it'd be a while. You'd have to get really specific with, like, describing salt and then size of salt crystals and then distribution, and then maybe you're using some kind of randomizer that distributes them unevenly and has pockets that are slightly more concentrated than others. But how do you tell it to do something like that on a gradient with concentrations? That's some serious math.
Yeah. No,
That's some really serious math.
But that's also why.
That's why just you can't have any rando who can't do math on the Enterprise.
But that's also, the difference between why you can go to a McDonald's and it tastes exactly the same no matter which McDonald's you go to, because it's a computerized recipe that's perfectly distributed every single time and proportioned out perfectly every single time, but it also loses that element of human variation that creates a different nuance.
I remember reading something a while back. They were talking about how at some point the person that works at a fast food place is going to be more of an IT engineer who keeps the systems running and occasionally might have to clean something. So their jobs are systems administration and janitorial custodial services.
Basically, I mean, that's how it was at Starbucks when we transitioned.
Yeah.
Because part of it is, when you go from doing everything manually to pushing buttons, then it is interface management, and that's kind of where between tracking the order and executing the actual creation of the drinks, almost everything was done through a computer by I think I was done working at Starbucks by like 2005 or some shit. Almost every transaction or almost everything that you did as a worker went through a computer interface to make something happen, whether it's, warming up the food, fucking making the drink, warming up the milk. I think maybe pulling the coffee was about the only thing that was still regular, just like.
Oh man, I'm sure that there's some job in like Futurama where the person just sticks around for just to press one button.
Yeah, I mean, but that's
the future.
But again, that's because you can't automate shit, because things happen and bugs happen and systems fail. So you need to make sure that it's not the one time that the system happens to crash or whatever.
Yeah, you have to have operators and technicians, and administrators. Those will be the on-site personnel of any establishment at some point. I think that things like U-Scan at the store make even more sense now. It's like the best argument for U-Scan that I've ever seen. It's like, no, I don't want you touching my food. It's already been handled enough already. And then, I think that it's going to be more complex for a cash-based economy to exist if everyone's concerned that touching the wrong cash could give you a life-changing disease.
That's a whole nother aspect, because then it's like, that's clearly a problem, but then you have people who are like the mark of the beast and all this stupid shit where.
Yeah, but if we could just scan an image with our phone and then press a button on our phone without ever having to touch the other machine to pay for something.
Right.
Or
of course, if you're logical, it makes sense, but these are people who believe the mark of the beast can be something digital, even though there's no mention of anything digital when they're talking about the mark of the beast. It's either a mark on your hand or a mark on your forehead. There's no computer discussion. There's no talk of a fucking cell phone. So if your prophecy can't get a cell phone, don't bring it to me. Don't bring me no shit that didn't get the cell phone part.
And he said unto Noah, use your cell phone to call for help. I mean, like...
That's a real prophecy.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if somebody predicted cell phones in the year fucking 0 BC or whatever, and they were like, yeah, these people are going to walk around and be able to talk to each other on shit that doesn't have any wires. You don't know what wires are because wires don't exist yet. But trust me, these things are going to exist. I call that person a prophet.
It'd be like, tell me, sir, do tablets still exist in the future? Yes. Everyone will have a tablet. All men and women shall have tablets.
That person doesn't exist.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
So no, that's a cell phone is not the mark of the beast. Digital currency is not mark of the beast. Bitcoin's not mark of the beast.
Well, what was it? Buckminster Fuller talked about the Dynabook, which eventually became a laptop.
Right. Yeah, that's a profit.
That's a real profit.
Yeah.
But that was within like the 20th century.
Hyperlinks? Motherfucker predicted hyperlinks?
Yeah.
Or I don't know if he predicted them or described them so people could build them.
He described something that would become the hyperlink.
That's profit right there.
Yeah. Man, we're all really just following in his footsteps at this point.
I mean,
let's figure out the stuff that he was talking about. That's what happens. It's like woo.
Or Marshall McLuhan. That dude was that dude 100% predicted where we're at with media right now. That's a prophet, and said it accurately, not in a nebulous roundabout way. Like everything is described spot on, minus the only thing he's missing saying is iPhones. He just doesn't say iPhones. He says everything but iPhones.
Yeah, I think.
And Twitter. He doesn't say Twitter.
Well, I think that's like too specific, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. That's about the only thing he leaves out is specific shit like Facebook and Twitter. Everything he's talking about is Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, but
he just doesn't say the names.
But Facebook and Twitter existed as forums at some point, or way before social networking was a term, or before social media was a concept.
Right.
There were forums on bulletin boards. Like you could just dial into a bulletin board.
I mean, that shit still exists.
Yeah, IRC is still a thing. There's going to be they extended the privilege of the Patriot Act recently, right? So now they can check people's internet searches again.
Yeah, which, I mean,
it's like coming.
Well, but again, there's just so much information. On the one hand, yeah, that's draconian, but on the other hand, I don't fucking care because how many people are searching stupid shit like raccoon hats right now? They have to sift through,
or
has to automate it.
Or was it from the Tanuki from Super Mario 3? They're looking for Tanuki hats.
I mean, I was talking about a real hat for a real raccoon.
Oh, for a raccoon, a hat for the animals. Oh,
yeah. So because people are fucking random and stupid, like somebody's out Googling how to buy a hat for a fucking raccoon or some stupid shit right now. So they have to sift through shit like that to find actual terrorist threats. So like, I'm not, I'm more worried about the algorithmic searches that they're using, because then it's going to be, what are Muslims talking about right now?
No,
or what are black activists talking about? Because that's what they're looking for.
I think the thing that people should be worried about, well, no, most people won't worry about it because most people probably aren't looking at things like child porn or how to create explosives or doing any of that fucking dumb shit. Like, they'll find domestic terrorists doing this. That's what they're going to find. They'll find the dumb motherfuckers out there who are doing searches for whatever dumb shit that they need to do so they can learn how to blow shit up because they're not smart enough to do this stuff on their own.
Like, most people use the internet for legal porn and time wasting.
Yeah, that's what
most people use the internet for.
It's entertainment. It's like a variation of, it's a slightly interactive television that gives you stuff to read periodically. I feel like I read more on the internet than I watch, but I always have something on in the background. So I'm not sure if that's like listening or watching, because I'm not really watching it.
No, it's sensory. It's feeding sensories or senses.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like it's flashing lights.
Ooh, pretty lights.
It is. I mean,
Well,
we can't sense the fucking screen refresh rate, but we're looking at flashing lights.
Yeah.
We don't like to
Sparkles.
think of ourselves like that, but once you realize the flashing lights is what is attracting you, it's way easier to just accept it and manage it.
Yeah.
It's flashing lights, man.
Well, that's a really good place to go with this. Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.